Hello, everyone. This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardines, to use this as an educational material. Thank you. These are the learning objectives of this topic. What is global governance? With the integration of COVID-19 pandemic. Explain the effects of globalization on governments. Identify the institution that govern international relations and differentiate internationalism from globalism. Identify the rules and functions of the United Nations. Identify the challenges of global governance in the 21st century and explain the relevance of the state amidst globalization. Now, let's talk about what is global governance. Global governance refers to institution that coordinates the behavior of transnational actors, facilitate cooperation, resolve disputes, and alleviate collective action problems. This governance broadly entails making, monitoring, and enforcing rules. The common issues that faces global governance are the ethnic conflicts, infectious diseases, climate change, food insecurity, and other pressing threats. Global governance began in the mid 19th century. It became particularly prominent in the aftermath of World War I and more so after and the end of World War II. Global governance also gives potential to nations by reducing risk and enable faster, more secure growth and also enhance your reputation and build trust.
So, global governance practices part comprises of granting a fruitful reaction to COVID-19, giving a stream of work on organization changes that bolster client nation in exploring the expanded delicacy, extraordinary weight on assess and quickly advancing large-scale benefit conveyance needs. Taking part and bringing together all countries is another angle of worldwide administration that makes a difference to resolve inconsequential issues. We all know that COVID-19 gives its nations a noteworthy impediment. In this way, worldwide administration is vital to overcoming these pandemics. This can be why it's so noteworthy to the widespread world. After COVID-19, strong institutions that are capable, effective, open, inclusive, and accountable must be built in client countries. According to the Governance Global Practice, the World Bank's dual objectives of eradicating extreme poverty and fostering shared prosperity are centered on sustainable growth and inclusive development. The institutional and governance focuses on steps of the federal government may take to support and complement activities in various sectors, agencies, and levels of local, state, and local government. The latter focuses on steps that can be made via modifying institutions and governance arrangements in support of such policies rather than on specific policy responses such as approaches to testing, quarantining, or fiscal stimulus.
Effects of globalization on governments. Globalization influences both government expenditure and public debt positively and significantly in the long run, while it influences tax revenue negatively. So, as countries become more interconnected, governments may need to invest in infrastructure, education, and healthcare to remain their country competitive. Additionally, um, It can create economic opportunities that require government spending, such as supporting industries that export goods and services, uh, like us, the seafarers. So, the positive and significant influence of globalization on public debt can be attributed to several factors. As governments increase expenditure to adapt to globalization, they may need to borrow money to cover these costs. So, however, it is essential for governments to so manage their debt responsibly to avoid excessive borrowing and could lead to financial instability.
Moreover, the effect of globalization and the increased share of indirect taxes in the long run is more than the effects on the increased share of direct taxes. Globalization has led to a decline in the power of national governments to direct and influence their economics, especially with regard to microeconomic management and to determine their political structures. In its simplest version, it stipulates that globalization reduces public expenditures because international competition effectively triggers a race for the best location across nations, which fosters tax competition and leads to expenditure retrenchment as the more complete international integration of financial globalization puts pressure on nations to reduce tariffs, subsidies, and other barriers to free trade. This consequently promotes economic growth, create jobs, make companies more competitive, and lower prices for consumers. Spurs economic development. Governments also play a role in international trade, for example, in drawing foreign direct investment, for short FDI, which also encourages the spread of globalization, especially into new global regions. Attitudes to FDI, subsides, and special economic zones are ways in which governments do this.
Good day, sir. I am the Cadet Delgado Ronaldo, and today I am going to identify the institutions that govern international relations. So, in my slide, there are four institutions that you can see. First is the WTO, or the World Trade Organization. So, the main objective of the World Trade Organization is the raising and the standard of living of people, promoting full employment, expanding the production and trade, and utilizing the world's resources optimally. Also, ensuring that the developing and less developed countries have better share of growth in the world trade. So the second institution that we are going to talk about today is the International Monetary Fund. So the objective of this institution is to help in increasing employment and real income of people. Second is solving the international monetary problems that distort the economic development of nations. So the third institution that we are gonna tackle today is the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. So the main objective of this institution is to eliminate trade barriers that act as constraints for developing countries. So also promoting international trade for speeding up the economic development of the countries. Also, uh, UNCTAD can also provide technical assistance to developing countries, especially low developed countries. So the fourth And last institution that we are gonna talk about today is the United Nations. So the United Nations officially came into existence on October 24, 1945. So the principles of UN are to save the future generations from war, reaffirm human rights, and establish equal rights for all persons. In addition, it also aims to promote justice, freedom, and social progress for the peoples of all its member states. So, also, as it was in the past, the main function of the UN today, in addition to maintaining peace, the UN aims to protect human rights and provide humanitarian assistance when needed. In 1948, the General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a standard for its human rights operation.
Good day, sir. I am the cadet Lisin Junli, and my topic to be reported is differentiate the internationalism and globalism. So, globalism is an ideology based on the belief that peoples, goods, and information ought to be able to cross national borders unfettered. Seeks to describe and explain nothing more than a world which is characterized by a network of connection that span multi-continental distances. It attempts to understand all the interconnections of the modern world and to highlight patterns that underlie them. So example is economic globalism involves long-distance flows of goods, services, and capital and the informations and perceptions that accompany market exchange. Next is internationalism. Internationalism is a movement which advocates a greater economic and political cooperation among nations for theoretical benefit of all. Internationalism teaches that the people of all nations have more in common than they do differences, and thus all that nations should treat each other as equals. Supporters of internationalism are known as internationalists and generally believe that humans should unite across national, political, cultural, racial or class boundaries to advance their common interests or that governments should cooperate because their mutual long-term interests are of greater importance than short-term disputes. Their goal is unite all countries and actively oppose nationalism and war. Example of this is United Nations mission, the maintenance of internationalism of international peace and security to prevent conflicts, helping parties in conflict make peace, peacekeeping, and combat conditions to allow peace to hold and flourish.
Hello, I am Cadet John Walter D. Saberon. In, as you can see in this slide, my topic is about identify the roles and functions of the United Nations. So, the first, there are five functions and rules of the United Nations. So, from my, from the assigned topic is maintain international peace and security, protect human rights, and then deliver humanitarian aid. So the first is maintain international peace and security. The United Nations was created in 1945 following the devastation of the Second World War with one central mission, the maintenance of international peace and security. The UN accomplishes this by working to prevent conflict, helping parties in conflict make peace, deploying conditions to allow peace to hold and flourish. These activities often overlap and should reinforce one another to be effective. Protect human rights. The term human rights was mentioned 7 times in the UN's founding charter, making the promotion and protection of human rights a key purpose and guiding principle of the organization. In 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights laid down the principles that brought human rights into the realm of international law. Since then, the organization has diligently protected human rights through legal instruments, and on-the-ground activities. Deliver humanitarian aid. One of the purposes of the United Nations, as stated in its charter, is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character. The UN first did this in the aftermath of the Second World War II on the devastated continent of Europe, which it helped to rebuild.
Support sustainable development and climate action. Its United Nations launched its Sustainable Development Agenda in 2015, reflecting the growing understanding by member states that the development model that is sustainable for this and future generations offer the best path forward for reducing poverty and improving the lives of people everywhere. At the same time, climate change began making a profound impact on the consciousness of humanity. With the polar ice caps melting, global sea levels rising and cataclysmic weather events increasing in ferocity, no country in the world is safe from the effects of climate change. Uphold international law is the UN Charter in its preamble set an objective to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from the treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained. Ever since, the development of and respect for international law has been a key part of the work of the organization. This work is carried out in many ways by courts, tribunals, multilateral treaties, and by the Security Council, which can approve peacekeeping nations, impose sanctions, or authorize the use of force when there is a threat to international peace and security if it deems this necessary.
Good day everyone. Today I will discuss how did COVID-19 challenge the global governance. First, financial support. The World Bank Group is taking broad, fast action to help developing countries strengthen their pandemic response, increase disease surveillance, improve public health interventions, and help the private sectors continue to operate and sustain jobs. It is deploying up to $160 billion in financial support over the next 15 months to help countries protect the poor. So, World Bank Group is deploying $160 billion to help the country who was needed. And the big challenge of our global governance is to increase disease surveillance, improve public health interventions. So the example of this, our global governance is build isolation centers, COVID-19 facilities. So if there is a person who was infected by the COVID-19, we can put there into isolation center and we can use the facilities of COVID-19. So next is the help the private sectors continue to operate and sustain job. We all know that because of COVID-19, too many people lost their jobs. So our global governance support the company to operate again and back their jobs. Next is global governance are having deal with the critical issues of disrupted education system, increased poverty. They are also having to deal with the vaccine access and distributions of the vaccines to the people. So, as we all know, because of COVID-19, the education system is changed. The global governance changed education system into modular. So that is biggest challenge to them. And next is vaccine access. So as we all know, during COVID, we have no vaccines yet. So it is biggest challenge to them to get the vaccines by the help of public health interventions. They can get the vaccines. And the next is this distributions of the vaccines to the people, because there are some people who do not want to be injected by the COVID vaccines because they're afraid of the side effects. And that's all. Thank you.
In the era of globalization, the term state usually means a sovereign nation with borders, a government, and a control over its affairs. However, globalization has transformed the state's role. It now involves increased global interconnectedness in economies, cultures, and societies, with the flow of goods, services, information, technology, and people across borders. This has made the state role more complex and multifaceted. This report explores the significance of the state in the context of globalization, examining its role in economic, political, and social dimensions. Economic relevance, trade, commerce. State facilitate international trade through policies, regulation, and trade agreements. They collect revenue, enforce trade laws, and protect domestic industries. Foreign direct investment, or FDI. States create a conducive environment for FDI through legal frameworks and infrastructure. A political relevance, sovereignty, and governance. States maintain sovereignty over their territories and govern their citizens. They represent their citizens' interests in international organizations and negotiations. Security and diplomacy. States provide national security and engage in diplomacy to safeguard their interests. They negotiate treaties, engage in peacekeeping, and address global challenges. Social relevance, social welfare, and human rights. States ensure the well-being of their citizens through social programs. They protect human rights, including labor rights and access to education and healthcare. Cultural identity. States preserve cultural heritage and promote cultural exchange in the globalized world. They shape national identity and foster a sense of belonging. Challenges and adaptation. Global challenges. States face challenges such as climate change, pandemics, and cyber threats. They collaborate with other states and international organizations to address these challenges. Adaptive strategies. States adapt by reforming policies, embracing the technology, and enhancing global cooperation. They seek a balance between national interests and global responsibilities. The state remains highly relevant amid globalization, playing essential roles in economic, political, and social spheres while facing new challenges. States adapt and evolve to navigate the complexities of an interconnected world. The state's significance persists as it continues to be a central actor in the shaping of the global landscape.